Welcome to the Phoenix Prosperity Podcast, where wealth meets legacy. Join your host, Tim Fergestad, as we explore the journeys of Phoenix's finest to success and beyond.
Hi, this is Tim Fergestad. Thank you for joining us. I'm very pleased to have Bret Bostwick here with me today. Bret Bostwick, MD, is a physician scientist, biotechnology consultant. He is an accomplished drug developer with broad experience in the biotechnology and pharmaceutical industry, including leadership in drug discovery, clinical development, translational science, biomarkers. I did not touch on all the stuff you've been doing. You've been very accomplished in a variety of fields, largely biomedical, but I wanted to, well, again, thank you for coming, being on here with me today. When you reflect on your life's journey so far, can you share an instance that you believe sort of significantly contributed to your success? What were the driving forces behind Bret?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Tim. Thank you for having me on, and I'm intrigued by the title of the podcast and getting to listen to the other episodes. I think that probably there's many moments, right, where you kind of pivot in life, or you take a different tack. That when you look back, it was significant, but at the time, perhaps you were aware or not. But there was kind of one instance where I remember it well because I knew it was an important concept at the time I was making the pivot. And I had, met a number of mentors who had been kind of trying to get me to approach life decisions more deliberately. And it took, there was a moment where the light switch kind of went off and said, well, wait a minute, instead of kind of just making intuitive decisions or drifting through, I can actually start to think.
Right.
Yeah. Think, critically, have an organized approach to life decision making. And after that point in time, life was much more intentional and directional. So for me, the word that I would kind of use, and I often tell myself, is deliberate. Make deliberate decisions. And that has slowly over the years permeated, to everything in my life. Not just business related decisions, but which relationships, how I approach food, how I approach the information I take in.
Awesome.
Across the board. Yeah.
Excellent. You said the tack you've taken. I think that's a great little. I don't know if that was an intentional pun, but I'd like to point out that you're down below on your sailboat. You're living. You've not left civilization behind. You've left the mainland behind, and you're living at sea now. That you want to give us a background a little bit on that?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, you're right. I'm in the
biomedical sailor.
Yeah. I'm in the port hull of a catamaran, currently in the Abaco Islands of the Bahamas, with a bunch of other boats that are anchored nearby. And I guess it's part of a theme, right, where you make very intentional decisions about what you want your day to look like, and what you want your life to look like. And we were at a point with the age of our kids, and our careers where we wanted to, spend more time with nature, spend more time in the water, spend more time feeling the weather, which often we ignore in these cush houses we live on land.
Sure.
And it's been a fantastic experience. It's much easier to control what you're exposed to day when you're out here. And so, yeah, we've really enjoyed it.
I'm very jealous. I've told you that a few times now. I love checking in with Bret and seeing where he is. He's like Carmen Sandiego. Where in the world are you? And show me some great pictures of the incredible things you're doing. And with the kids, that's amazing. I was talking to you one time. I was going to talk about appetite for risk and how it's changed over time for you. But you had a great quote that I wrote down when you said it. You said, we were talking about an investment opportunity, and you said, Tim, I probably wouldn't be talking to you for my sailboat if I didn't have some appetite for risk. Something like that. It was a great one.
Yeah, risk is one of those funny things, right? Because I think we in the business world, we quantify, the risk-taking appetite of a particular group of people or a business relative to what part of the business cycle they're in. But we rarely do that with our own lives. Like, what is the magnitude of the risk I'm taking on? What's at the other end of that? And just like most businesses are kind of scrappiest and most successful and make the most progress in that medium risk-taking appetite phase, I think probably the same is true in life. If you minimize all of the risks, life gets pretty boring, right? Whereas if you kind of are willing to take on some measured, medium-sized risk, it keeps things quite exciting. But yes, I mean,
Right.
so certainly if, there's some risks in popping on a sailboat, living with your family, and there's risks in investment decisions as well. Yeah.
Sure, sure. But how has your appetite changed over time?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think my appetite has grown, where I increasingly will take on more risks. And that's probably because I have my hands in more pots of things that are going on. And so you can kind of justify, the totality of the risks you're taking on rather than focusing on individual risks.
Sure.
I've also noticed, just to kind of go back to the, straddle business and personal, on the personal level and with life, often risks turn into adventures, right? And experiencing new things builds relationships so much quicker. It solidifies relationships with family and friends. And so, doing things that are a little outside of your comfort zone, I think that's a healthy stretch. And it's certainly for the point of life I'm in, it kind of adds a spice in every day. So I love it. This morning I was spear diving after fish, and pretty minimal risk down here, really. But there's sharks around, blood in the water. So, these sorts of things I think just kind of add a little bit of spice to your day.
Oh, for sure. Excellent. Great answer. Yeah, the diversification obviously helps you, take on more stuff. But I'd also say that you've reinforced your risk taking because you've had some successes, right? Which some people, they try something, they branch out and they get their hands swatted, so they don't want to do it anymore. But I'm sure you've had some successes, some very successful, but also what sort of setbacks have you had, and how has that sort of tested your resolve?
Yeah, I guess I come from the kind of fail fast mentality, right?
Nice.
And so certainly on the business side, when I first got started, I was first a medical geneticist by training, and you learn these kind of theories of genetics, which geneticists eventually kind of think of as laws of genetics. And then there's drugs that work on those pathways. So over time, you analyze these drugs as to whether or not they're possible to work, given the laws of genetics. And so, it's easy to go into that overconfident at the beginning. So I was very kind of black and white and categorical, like this can't possibly
Right,
work,
right.
or this will definitely work. But then there's such another side to that. Like the company that has the great idea and the drug that will likely work can have the wrong people, or they
Mhm.
can have people who aren't all playing together nicely in the sandbox. And they start throwing sand, and the idea falls to the wayside, and the company goes belly up. So I
Right.
learned that, it's not really just the science underpinning that's important, but it's really the people and the momentum that you feel the company has at the time of your investment that'll probably better dictate the progress. And
Sure.
of
And
course,
what sort of go ahead.
yeah. And so I transitioned my academic career. I was an assistant professor at a university in the US, and I transitioned to full-time industry in biotech, where I really kind of could see under the hood. And then in parallel, I did a lot of consulting, which is now what I do solely is consulting to mostly early stage biotech companies.
Okay. And what I was going to say is based on your point, is that keeping the team together? Is that sort of leadership? Is that a skill that you've been able to uh, uh, grow? Is that a muscle that you've gotten to exercise over the years in the different positions you've had?
Yeah, it's interesting because I would call myself nothing close to an expert in this space, but I've certainly grown. And so when I look in the rearview mirror, I can see where I used to be as a leader and how I kind of approach it now. Um, I've convinced myself that the hardest things to do in life usually can't be done alone, right? You need a team of people. And then some of the most medically complicated tasks, you need subject matter experts who have very high IQs. And that often comes with very challenged EQs or emotional
Right.
quotients that are, coming with those IQs. So it's very easy to assemble a team of 10 people who will get in a sandbox. I'll go back to that analogy and will almost immediately throw sand. And I think the first stage of a leader is how you get people to just kind of each sit in the sandbox without throwing any sand. But that doesn't actually build anything. So, the latter stage is how do you get everyone to be building the same castle, to focus on it, to really craft it, and
Right.
end up with a product where maybe some of their natural tendencies are not to work together on things. And so I think that is where I've approached leadership from, is really trying to think about the composition of who you put in that sandbox, the relationships you build so that everyone can be building that castle together.
Are there particular traits you prioritize or try to kind of like a writer when they're making a sitcom? They want the analytical, they want the right, you want the real comic relief, you want the good mix.
Yeah. I like to understand where people are on in their own journey, with how much they introspect on, you know, how they're seen externally, how much they have a growth mindset. Because inevitably, when you get on one of these teams, you're going to have to adapt and change at least some, to meet everyone where
Sure.
they're at. And so
Do you
that's
do you do
the,
personality? Do you do personality tests or like disc profiles on people so you get a better feel for how you can do it?
yeah, I don't do it formally. Certainly some companies do. But no, I try to really ask them, about times in life where they've really noticed themselves growing, what sorts of people they put themselves around, to try to foster that growth. Um, you know, Ask about times where they've had, difficulties working with coworkers and how they navigate that. Those kinds of questions usually give you, that mindset. And what becomes increasingly difficult is as you're looking for rarer and rarer subject matter experts, you notice that those things can be harder and harder to find. Like one project I'm doing now, we need, machine learning, artificial intelligence folks. We need um, neurobiologists. We need business, commercial assessment folks, and to get these all around in finance. So these are where to try to find, the right set of people that'll play well together is especially challenging.
Sure, sure. I'm guilty of that too, right? I'm a nerd. I'm a neuroscientist, and my social skills are getting better, but I'm not particularly well spoken. I'm to have a podcast anyway. So yeah, I can imagine there's some real challenges when you dial into some of those niche experts. So I guess looking ahead, what sort of trends excite you in your industry, right? And how are you preparing to leverage them?
Yeah,
AI,
artificial
you just
intelligence.
mentioned something. Yeah.
Yeah, AI and machine learning, they're here. Um, a couple of years ago, I remember going to talks and I just wasn't seeing it. I was hearing about what would happen,
Right.
and now you see it. And so I think that there's tools now that can be paired, with teams to really amplify what they're trying to accomplish and can be paired well. But certainly on the discovery biology side, there is, now in silico experimentation that's being done that can kind of dwarf the speed of anything that's being done in the real world. And those results are proving to be increasingly useful. So understanding how large language models work, how neural networks work, but also kind of where the field is going and how to position. Um, I think Wayne Gretzky once said, move to where the puck is, not to where it's been. Or actually, I think his dad said that,
Where
Walter
it's
Gretzky.
where move to where it's going to be, right?
Yeah,
skate to
move to
where
where
it's
it's
going to
going to
be,
be.
not where it is. Right.
Yeah, exactly. Not where it is. Sorry, I messed it up. But of course, no one goes to where it was, right? And
Right.
where it's
Right.
going to be is a very difficult thing to figure out because there's a place where it's going to be in the near future, in the medium term, and longer term future. And so I think
Right.
trying to figure that out in the space of biotech, I mean, what proportion of drugs are going to be discovered by human brains versus AI algorithms, a decade from now? How many clinical trials will be run in silico? Those are
Right.
those are big questions right now in the field.
Right. Okay. Um, I was going to ask you about a book. You just reminded me of one. It was this is fiction though, so it's not particularly good. Dan Brown. Do you remember Dan Brown, author?
Yeah,
He
vaguely. I don't
he
think
did
I've
the Da
ever
Vinci
read him though.
Code.
Yeah, yeah,
He did the Da Vinci Code. He did some good ones, but he did one called Origin, and they were basically, it was because they used to put experiments for the generation of life in a test tube, right? You put all the different simple compounds and you zap it with lightning and other stuff, and the results weren't showing anything. But when they did it in computers, and they just realized that we didn't look at these experiments over decades and go back and look at the compounds because it takes time, and that's something that you can do with computers. You can run experiments, you can simulate them over way longer, and you actually get some different results. And then they go through like Robert Langdon runs through Sagrada de la Familia at a modern art museum in Madrid, or no,
yeah,
Barcelona. But anyway, good stuff.
yeah. No,
Um,
I'm getting flashbacks of the movie. I think I don't know if I ever did the book, but I recently revisited a book that I revisit every decade intentionally, and I'm rereading the Selfish Gene
okay.
by Richard Dawkins.
Ah,
And I've noticed, every decade it resonates completely different with me.
right.
And a lot of
Good
people
books
don't
will.
know, but yeah, the term meme, right? He actually coined that in the 1970s,
Really?
right? Yeah, and
No.
memetics, which was the parallel
Okay.
study of how cultural information flows, was akin
Okay.
to genetics, right? Darwinian genetics. And so I just find
Okay.
that area fascinating to think about, and the way that information flow has accelerated, even in the last couple years, and will continue to do so, is something I think we all need to prepare for in the future.
Right. 100%. Um, the fact that you can go back to a book and get something else out of it too is a good testament that you're growing, right? That's I guess that's good to know. So I want to just take a step back personally and just ask you what your typical day looks like, right? And how do you balance work and life, particularly on a boat?
Yeah. Um, Maybe I'll come back to deliberate, right? So I I live maybe it looks a little more regimented, but it's actually not. It's deliberate with what I do every day. So which relationships I'm going to foster, you know, whether I'm going to go fishing and what I'm going to get out of that, the information I take in. I'm on an information diet that's like probably as strict as some, vegans are with their diet. I'm very intentional about the kind of information I take in, and then I don't eat all the time out of the fire hose of social media. I try to provide these gaps where I can digest what I've learned. So I like long form, curated, moderated
Sure.
information that I take in, and then I design in my day periods to just sit and think about it. So I'm kind of really, prescribed to an information diet. It's amazing how many, I think, Americans, but I think everyone, right, is very focused on their nutritional diet. Most people by their 20s or
Sure,
30s
sure.
realize you can't just stick anything in your mouth and expect your body to keep running. But we all kind of, a lot of us get stuck on these smartphones and swipe endlessly for
Sure.
hours at
You're programming your brain
notifications.
how to think, yeah, and behave. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's nothing real deliberate in what you've walked away with, right? And so I've
Yeah.
done my best to turn my smartphone back to a dumb phone, get rid of notifications, jettisoned, Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and a lot of these things to try to get back um, you know, time to think, which I think is becoming increasingly a rare thing.
Yes.
That silence. We all fill it with noise.
Sure. Particularly, that's something. I have two teenagers, and your kids are about 6 years younger, or what, how old are they?
6 and 8. Yeah, 6 and 8.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, they need that time to be bored, to just sit with their own thoughts and stuff. And they often don't have that because they're so busy with band or school, and then they come home and they're on devices, and they need to be bored. That's one of the bigger findings I've seen in the past decade, is how important that is.
Yeah, I think that's right. It almost seems like a uh, being comfortable being bored is almost a prerequisite to this, idea of peace and quiet, or happiness that you can get
Yes.
out of peace and quiet. If you're so uncomfortable in boredom, it's like, how do you ever enjoy a quiet moment? So it's one thing you get out here, you can sail your boat into the middle of nowhere, and you can turn off all your devices and you just hear the wind and the waves. So it's nice.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So again, just to bookend that earlier question on, you were all on the same boat. How do you balance that? I mean, you're disciplined. You focus. Do you have time blocks? I mean, do you have school for the kids at certain times? How does that play out?
Yeah, we do homeschool with the kids, so boat school. And so Amy, my wife, and I alternate how we do that. And she takes on the larger role of organizing the curriculum and content. And the kids are really learning at their own pace. We don't really prescribe to any sort of grade level concept, but they can kind of accelerate in areas where they can, and then they can take longer in other areas if they so choose. And there's a lot of joy in revisiting all that content that you forgot about, right? I especially, of course, enjoy the
Sure.
science and the new math, which is just,
Oh,
I don't know when that changed, but that's really fun as your kids go through it. And so, yeah, it's a big part of, and we school on weekends sometimes and on holidays, and then sometimes there's weekdays that we take off and do adventures. We do a lot of experiential schooling, visiting things, going looking for things in nature is how we do a lot of their science. So that's a nice time that we always get to spend with our kids. And then, how do you get exercise on a boat? You can't really run around that much. There's not that much space, but we do a lot of swimming and kayaking and paddleboarding. And of course, we can always get off and go to the beach and go for a run, or and then we're with a lot of other boats. So the kids often take off and socialize in the afternoon hours.
okay. You mentioned get off the boat and run. Do you run? Because I've been flying a lot lately, and there's nothing like long flights to make me want to take up running. I don't,
Yeah.
when you hit the land, is that what the kids do? Do they just go nuts?
Oh yeah, the kids go nuts, and yeah, so do we. Although I prefer, I think, walking with someone so I can have a conversation, because I love the walk and conversation model. But I don't know if it gets my cardio in the zone I'm supposed to be in. So
Sure.
yeah, I mean, but yeah, and I would say our number one aerobic activity is actually swimming. Especially,
Okay.
you can get some good currents out here, so to just kind of stay in place can be quite the workout, and it's a lot of fun.
Excellent. Excellent. Again, super jealous. Um, I've been to the Caribbean a few times and sailed with my boy. I used to race sailboats on Lake Superior originally. We originally met in Madison. I did a little bit on Lake Mendota. Did you ever sail there?
Yeah, I actually did
Yeah.
sail
Okay.
there. I sailed there quite a bit on the Techs and the Badger sloops,
Yep.
and then I graduated to the J boats and the bigger boats, and my wife, and I used to do a lot of first few dates sailing on Lake Mendota, so we love that place.
Oh, very cool. Very cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Excellent. Um, well, since we brought up sailing, so my son and I, we went around the San Juans last year with a buddy who grew up outside of Seattle, and that was really cool. But my favorite is sailing around where you are right now, the Caribbean. Where else are you headed? Are you just going to play around in the South Atlantic and the Caribbean for a while, or I just had a different colleague transfer. Came from France to the Virgin Islands. Took him a pretty long time, but is he up for something like that? What's on the horizon?
Yeah, no, it's funny. We were just talking about this last night. One of our rules on the boat is to kind of not have a plan. We don't really
Okay.
have a schedule because we've learned, like we met up with some other boats that we really enjoy, the people on those boats, and then you kind of have to make plans collectively instead of individually,
Sure.
which is a fun process. So right now we're traveling with 5 or 6 other boats that we like, and so I think we're all going to generally head north to get out of the upcoming hurricane season. So probably by June we'll be going back to the States, and we'll probably go back up to the Chesapeake Bay. Um, but then next season I expect we'll take off again and probably go down in the Southern Caribbean and beyond. And certainly a
Okay.
lot of sailors enjoy passing through the Panama Canal and doing the whole Galapagos and South Pacific route as well. So
Okay.
I wouldn't be surprised if we're there at some point, but I also wouldn't be surprised if we, get up one day and miss land life and we go back to something a little bit more normal and structured.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Transitioning back to success, and we'll close this out. But in terms of maintaining success, right? I mean, and financial stability, right? That generally requires strategy. How do you plan for your financial future to ensure both of those, stability and growth?
Yeah, I think of stability and growth. There's this concept, the human being versus the human doing, right? And the human doing, is not entirely negative. It's about actions and tasks and
Mhm.
sometimes making quick decisions and snap judgments. But there's sometimes progress is forged in the doing. But then the human being side, right? The other side is, you know, uh, perhaps a lot more intentional and deliberate, like I was talking about. So I try to consciously balance those. What like when am I in a mode where I'm trying to make quick progress on something, and where I'm going to rely on intuition to advance it more rapidly, and then when am I in a mode where I want to uh, understand the information I need to make a complex decision and really deliberate it, right? And so that's kind of how I approach it. I think there's a healthy mix between the two. And I don't know if that's a clear answer, but that's what it kind of came back to when you were kind of mentioning stability, right? Which is like
Okay. Yeah.
um, is generated by the doing, but without kind of taking in the human experience and the human part of it. I think you can kind of get lost in the actions. So yeah, it's a balance.
Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting answer. So, I guess given your success, what sort of desired impact do you want to have with it, right? In any parts of your life, in your boating community, anywhere. I don't know, with your kids, what are sort of your goals to give back, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I continue to be very passionate about how to come up with novel drug mechanisms. These are pharmaceutical drugs, right? Novel pathways that are discovered. What parts of those pathways can we target? And of course, the goal here is to help people who are sick, or sometimes help people who aren't sick so they don't get sick. Preventative medicine, which I think will be a increasing aim of the healthcare system over the next several decades. And so
For sure.
I
Or I
still
hope
like
so.
to dabble in that space, for sure. And in terms of legacy is an interesting concept that I haven't put a lot of time into thinking about. Um, maybe perhaps because of where I am in life. But I am very fascinated with kind of the power of ideas and the contagious nature of some ideas and how they can really live on, right? Long beyond any one individual's life. Back to the memetics, right? This is kind of a information that about culture that can be passed on. So I'm very interested in kind of new ideas and how they can be communicated, and can kind of live well beyond the human beings that initially started propagating them. So I don't have anything brilliant on that front, but that's kind of like where someday I hope to be able to have some ideas
Sure.
that are impactful beyond me.
Excellent. Still, I appreciate seeing how you think about these things. That's very interesting. Thank you. So, do you have any advice, I guess, reflecting on your journey that you would impart to people who are, about building, your wealth or success in your career or achieving things? I mean, obviously, you said to be deliberate, but do you know what I'm saying
Yeah,
regarding because I know you were a part of the I guess that you call it the fire movement.
yeah. Financial independence, retire early. I'm not so much prescribed to the retire early part of that, but I do think that um, trying to get to a point where you're financially independent allows you to choose, to own your time better and choose what you do and don't do. And that I think ultimately a lot of wealth stems from getting to a point where you don't need a particular job or to have a particular income in order to be okay next week, right? So I think financial independence is a piece of that. There's a lot of good podcasts on that subject and books. One of them, A Simple Path to Wealth by J.L. Collins, got me started. Gosh, back when I think I was in my late teenage years, I'm thinking about the power of compounding money. And um, another thing I think I would remind younger folks of is to don't dismiss the power of relationships. I think everyone knows how to social network these days, but those aren't really relationships, right? But having, intentionally, deliberately, we'll come back to
Sure.
reaching out to people who you think you find interesting, that you can mentor or get some coaching from, maintaining those relationships over a long period of time. When someone makes you an offer, it can be anywhere. You can be at a bar, and if someone says, "Hey, you should come check this out," or don't forget, don't think, "Oh, they didn't mean that wholeheartedly." Reach back out, go check it out. I think a lot of life's opportunities aren't spelled out, in a way where they say, "I'm about to give you an
Sure.
opportunity. Can you please
The,
recognize?"
the,
You
the
have to
door
take
just
it on your.
opened a little bit,
Yes, that's right.
but it's
That's right.
open.
It's open. So I think that, yeah, I think that, weighing that relationship piece as important as the skill sets or, the information you're going to learn is important.
Right. Okay, very good. And those that sort of overlaps with skill sets, like and maybe I agree. I think relationships are very important, but even for younger generations who don't have the social skills, and their relationships are all social media style and stuff. And I'm dealing with that right now with my kids. Uh, I'm not going to go there. There's a whole bunch of drama in my house this week about that. But he said she texted a girl or whatever.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
uh, that's their idea of relationship is we texted a couple times. Anyway,
Yeah, it's
so
amazing
for our
when you
list,
ask kids. If you ask kids today about their relationships, you just ask them basic questions like, "Why do you like this person?" Or, what value do you get out of the relationship? These basic, they can't, and and a lot. I think a lot of it now is that they're friends with someone because they're friends with you. Which is a very kind of um, reciprocal way of justifying it. But I think again, kind of approaching it in a very thoughtful way, saying, you know, because there's really cool people out there, but sometimes you have to kind of come at them quite intentionally to build the relationship, and it can really, pay dividends over time.
sure. We are the product of what is it? There was a Harvard study where like the average of the six closest people to us in our lives.
Yeah, yeah,
If they all start gaining weight, like there's a 90% chance you'll gain weight. Or if they all start biking, there's like a 90% chance you'll start biking. Things like that. It's important who you hang out with.
yeah. Who you surround yourself with? That's right. It did being raised by a village. That concept. I think that's we're all villages have kind of taken off their geography borders now, right? But you can be part of these online villages and you move with them and you take in their cultural norms, whether it's intentional or not. So
Right.
who you surround yourself with is probably one of the most important things you can control.
100%. All right. So I know you're not on a lot of social media or LinkedIn, but for our listeners who may want to learn more about you or connect, is there a way they can find you? Reach out?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course. Yeah, fire me an email. It's first name dot last name at gmail.com, Bret.Bostwick at gmail.com. And I'm always happy to get on and have, a Zoom conversation, human to human, without all those distractions. And you're right. I don't consume much social media, and my Twitter is so curated that it's very hard to find me on it. But yeah, email works the best old fashioned. And then of course I love just getting together, having a beer in person. So.
I imagine that's even more meaningful to you when you're at sea a lot, when you actually get to connect with other people again.
Yeah, in person. Yeah, we actually do it almost every single day. 4 hours of my evening is sitting around with other people and just talking about life
cool.
and the big ideas. But
Nice.
yeah, I mean, it's in some ways there's a constant push to do it here because you're both small relative to what you're used to. So you want to get off and you want to go look for connections. So there's a driving force behind it.
Right. We're social creatures.
Yeah, we are.
Sounds lovely. All right. Well, thank you for watching, and thank you very much, Bret, for joining me today. We appreciate you sharing your story and your insights into your success and impact in this crazy and beautiful world. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Inspired by our guests? Visit phoenixprosperitypodcast.com/guest and join us on the show and share your success story with Tim. The spotlight awaits.